Welcome to Bible Study with Fred. Let's have a Bible study on John chapter 6, verses 48 to 71. I am that bread of life, and your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. The Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Then Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man, and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. As the living Father hath sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. This is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. These things said he in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. So we did verse 59 there. Jesus uses a figure of speech, which I believe is called a synecdoche, or transfer, the exchange of one idea for another, as per Bullinger in his figures of speech in the Bible, which I cited earlier, to describe himself as the bread of life that came down from heaven. The Hebrews in the wilderness ate physical manna and died, but Jesus is the bread of life that if anyone eats spiritually, they will live. Notice how he did this in chapter 3 by equating two ideas, natural childbirth, or born of water, with the spiritual rebirth that is brought about by salvation in born of the Spirit. So there we have not only had two different births, but completely different kinds of births, one physical and one spiritual. Here there is physical food that satisfied temporarily, not preventing those who partook of it from dying physically, and spiritual food that satisfies permanently, and the promise is made that those who partake of it will never die. There are then two things to be considered here. One, that Jesus is not saying that his body is physical food that they must eat to live like cannibals, nor is he promising that physical biological death is prevented by eating this food. As in John chapter 3, we move from the temporal world to the eternal world by these comparisons. As unbelieving people with minds clouded by slavish devotion to meaningless ritualism will do, these people do not understand his meaning and are asking why or how they should eat and digest the speaker. Bible versions created after the Enlightenment, the Roman Catholic Counter-Reformation, and the triumph of German theology and higher criticism translate verse 58 without manna, after your fathers did eat, based on a handful of corrupt manuscripts. John 6:60 to 71 now. Many therefore of his disciples, when they had heard this, said, This is a hard saying. Who can hear it? When Jesus knew in himself that his disciples murmured at it, he said unto them, Doth this offend you? What? And if you shall see the Son of Man ascend up where he was before. It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. But there are some of you that believe not. For Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not, and who should betray him. And he said, Therefore said I unto you, that no man can come unto me, except it were given unto him of my Father. From that time many of his disciples went back, and walked no more with him. Then said Jesus unto the 12, Will ye also go away? Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. And we believe and are sure that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered them, Have not I chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? He spake of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, for he it was that should betray him, being one of the 12. In verse 65, the modern Bibles, influenced by the heresies of German higher criticism, remove my and replace it with the. As well, in verse 69, those same counterfeit Bibles remove Christ, the Son of the living. They repeat the testimony of devils in Mark 1:24 and Luke 4:34 and say, the Holy One of God. Jesus' own disciples are having trouble with this concept. Jesus asked them, Does this offend you? Now, we think of being offended as an outrage against our finer sensibilities, like an insult made against us, unintended or intended. But in the Bible, to offend can cause to stumble, or even cause someone to sin, as in Matthew 29:30 and 30, as well as to sin against, as in James 2:10. One way of looking at this exchange is to think of Jesus saying, Does this trip you up? You don't get it? Is making you doubt? Just wait until you see me ascend to heaven. How are you going to handle that? In verse 63, Jesus goes on to make the distinction clear by saying that the Spirit makes alive while the flesh has no lasting value. The Jews ate manna in the wilderness and hungered again, but those who believe in him will eat spiritual food and never need anything else. Physical food provides temporary relief, while the spiritual food he offers lasts for an eternity. The implication in verse 64 is that Judas doesn't really believe. There were probably others who had doubts, like Thomas. Read John 20, verses 26 to 31. Verse 65 reinforces what was already said in verse 44, reinforcing God's part in drawing men to Christ. Remember the first chapter of the gospel, John 1:12 and 13? But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. At this point, many of those who followed him walk away. Belief in the supernatural claims of Christ in the Bible are essential for a person to honestly call themselves a Christian. But for people such as Thomas Jefferson and others, those claims were and are impossible to accept. And Paul discusses that falling away or that falling back from salvation in Hebrews. They will either leave their faith of their youth or they adopt the teachings of Christ as a standard and deny the supernatural claim. There's losses in the atheist, however. To be a Christian gentleman without belief in the extranatural, the supernatural claims of Christ, is to be no Christian. To believe in a Christian philosophy without believing in the supernatural claims of Christ is to believe in nothing different from anyone else. There are many good, by the world's standards, persons of every faith or no faith at all, who will match such a so-called Christian's behavior and ambitions, but without believing what Christ said about himself. They are bound for an eternity of agony and suffering as if they were a Stalin or the most selfish person on earth. John 3:36, he that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life. He that believeth not the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. It is then that Peter expresses the understanding that is the basis of salvation, that Christ is God in the flesh and that God is a living being. Now we'll stop there. We'll pick it up with a side note about Judas next. That's a little bit off the wall. I want to do a special episode on that. So I'm going to ask you if you'll today please open the Bible and let God speak to you through his word. Then study the Bible, cross-reference the verses, pray to God for wisdom and understanding before you do either one, and then share your interpretation with someone else. You can purchase my comments on Amazon, or you can read them on blogger.com. I'll post the links below. But if you've watched this video this far, please click like and subscribe or follow and share the video with someone else. I look forward to your comments too. You might agree, disagree, have a different interpretation, whatever the case. Thank you.